At age 10, in school, I received my first class in modern languages. 6 years later, I took an exam. 12 years removed from that, and my level in that language, in German, is practically non-existent. How is it possible to study a language for 6 years and have nothing to show for it at the end of it? In this episode, I'm going to look at my experience with learning modern languages in school in Scotland. Welcome back to English from the North. So thank you for joining me once again on the podcast. Before we go any further, the link to the transcript is in the description below. So like I said in the introduction, today we're going to have a look at my experience with learning foreign languages in school. Because I've spoken about my journey with learning other languages. The first few episodes of the podcast were dedicated to learning Spanish and learning French and how I've really done that in the last sort of 3 years, my experiences with those languages, how the process has been, my level, and all that kind of stuff. But I did actually learn another language. I do have experience with learning another language. Like I said, in high school, well, not just in high school, in primary school as well, I learnt German. I spent 6 years learning German. What I'm going to say, how things I'm going to talk about, the system and all that has changed ever so slightly, but not a huge amount. And when I talk about my own experiences, I'm going to talk about the changes as well. But basically, when I was in school, the first time we received any kind of foreign languages was in the 6th year of primary school. So it was about sort of 10 years old. I think it was, the sort of the beginnings of what we would say primary 6, the 6th year of primary school. In Scotland, I've maybe explained this a little bit before, but primary school starts at age 5 to age 12, and then secondary school is 12 to 18. So in primary 6, when you're about sort of 10, 11 years old, was when you received your at least when I received my first we still call it modern languages, my first modern languages class. In my case, that was done not randomly, but it was allocated. When I was at school, there was an A class and a B class. That was sort of normally how they would divide the classes up. There'd be like a primary 1A and a primary 1B, or a primary 3A, or primary 3B. In my case, I was in the B class, and it was just a simple case of the A class got French and the B class got German. That's how it was done. It was just sort of assigned randomly. So I was in the class that got German. We had German for the first sort of year, kind of learned the basics, sort of vocabulary, kind of how to introduce yourself, all that kind of stuff. And then in primary 7, much the same thing continued. Although, and this is kind of where this came from, this is what the inspiration for this episode has come from, this kind of anecdote, because I was having my sort of usual classes of Spanish and French, and I remembered this from my time in primary 7. So for the first 3 months of primary 7, the teacher, the primary teacher, because in primary school you have one teacher who does sort of everything: English, maths, what little history and geography and science we got. The only other specialist teachers were like music and art, where we went to different classrooms, so that kind of stuff. But basically, your main teacher kind of did everything, and that included the modern language education. And for the first 3 months of primary 7, our usual teacher, she didn't teach us German. She couldn't teach us German because she had to go and complete a course for 3 months. Now you're probably thinking, well, is that a course to learn how to teach German? She could speak German, and she was learning how to just teach it, because obviously knowing how to speak a language and teaching a language are two different skill sets. No, in fact, she couldn't speak a word of German. She went on a course for 3 months, and then afterwards taught us German. So that was it. That was our experience of sort of learning German in primary school. That was the level in general of foreign language education. You had some teachers that could speak foreign languages and others that couldn't speak foreign languages that wanted to be teachers. Literally a 3-month course in how to speak German. I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you'll know from your own experience of learning English and other foreign languages that 3 months is not enough time. Like, you're maybe going to learn the basics. You're going to struggle to have a very high level. And so that was the sort of level of teaching we got. So you can imagine that it wasn't very good. But that's sort of like, in general, sort of saying not just British people, not Scottish people, English speakers in general, because it sort of happens in America and Australia and all these other countries, is that we're not known for our abilities with foreign languages. And I guess this kind of explains a little bit why. And it's kind of like this vicious cycle, the level of foreign languages isn't very good, so people can't really learn properly, so people can't improve, so you don't have good teachers, so then people can't improve, and then it kind of just it keeps going on and on the generations and all that. So that was kind of sort of what we were left with at the end of primary school. Fortunately though, when I went to secondary school, fortunately the teachers in secondary school to be a secondary teacher, and that's probably what I said about primary school teachers, because they have to do so many different things. It's probably why there isn't this requirement for a foreign language, because if they needed that requirement, it would be very difficult to recruit primary. It's already quite difficult to recruit primary school teachers in general in Scotland. It would be even harder if you're going to start insisting that people need a certain level of foreign languages. Fortunately, in the case of secondary school, to be a secondary teacher where that is your main job, obviously you're gonna need to speak the language, and so the teachers were a lot better. And so when I went to secondary school, it was mandatory to study 6 years of secondary school, and it was mandatory to study a foreign language from first year all the way through to fourth year, and we sat an exam at the end of fourth year. Now it's changed ever so slightly. It's mandatory only till third year, and the exams, the new sort of qualification that they have, you don't need to sit an exam in that one, and you don't need to take it all the way to fourth year. So now students don't sit exams. It's not mandatory to take a language all the way to sort of sit an exam and get an official level. And on the flip side with the primary school, I think now they're all focusing on French. Sort of German and other languages have kind of fallen away a bit, and the main focus is on French, and students start from like sort of 5-6 years old getting French in the class every day. So at least it's it's the age at which you start is better, because realistically sort of 10, 11 years old is a bit too, not too late, but it's better to start earlier, I guess, is the consensus for modern language. The earlier you start, the better. Obviously, you can learn a language. It's possible to learn a language at any age, but it is better to start earlier. And unfortunately, they have started earlier with primary school and things like that in general. And so now in high school, it's not mandatory until fourth year. When I did it, it was mandatory all the way to fourth year. But even then, the teaching methods wasn't very good. I've sort of spoken in other episodes about good ways to learn a language, comprehensible input, listening a lot, reading a lot, all that kind of stuff. And that was really absent when I was learning a language. It was sort of the very typical memories that I think everybody has from learning a language in school. Lots of tables of grammar, lots of vocabulary, lots of rules, and then you're expected to memorize all these rules, you're expected to memorize all this grammar, and then boom, have a conversation. And obviously, you can't do that. You really can't do that, because you don't have enough information. You haven't taken in enough information to be able to have a conversation, to be able to reproduce it, because you it's kind of a strange way to say it, but you know more than you can say, basically, like that. When we talk about languages, that the volume of information, your passive understanding is always going to be larger than what you can reproduce. I mean, that's just the natural way of it. People, when they talk about languages, they talk about having like a passive vocabulary and an active vocabulary, and your passive vocabulary is always going to be bigger than your active vocabulary. So the words that you can understand there's always going to be a higher number of words you can understand than words that you're going to have in your mind to use. And that kind of thing, it doesn't develop if you're not listening, if you're not reading. And unfortunately, in the case of my sort of language education, and I think happens a lot in a lot of language classes sort of in general, even nowadays, it wasn't, is the case. There's a lot of grammar, there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of things like that, and not enough listening, not enough reading, not enough sort of understanding the source material. One memory that I have specifically relating to that is I remember being in, this must have been a first year or a second year class in high school, and we were going over the case system in German, which is a pretty sort of tricky concept. The sort of conjugations of what would be the words, articles, the equivalent of the and an in German was, it's quite a tricky thing, because it changes based on, this is the thing, is I can't even really explain it properly nowadays, this whole thing, changing the word that you used to mean the or a or an, and the teacher was explaining the cases, and she was, up on the board saying, oh, this is the dative case and this is the accusative case. And I remember sitting looking at the board thinking, yeah, that's very good, but what's a case? I couldn't understand what it was for or what it was used for and how it works and all that kind of thing. And it's quite an important thing, I think, in German, sort of more Germanic languages, this sort of case system. And it just wasn't going in because, again, we didn't have this context. You didn't have this, what's the word? You didn't have that kind of, the context, I guess. You didn't see the language naturally. It was sort of taken out of context and dissected, and all these rules are kind of explained to you. And it's for a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, it's not the most interesting thing in the world, and it's not the easiest thing to understand. Unfortunately, as well, the way that the exams were done was not a good way to test your understanding, because in third year, fourth year was when you started being examined for the qualification. It was called a standard grade was the qualification. It's changed now. Now it's a nationals. They do national 4s in third year and national 5s in fourth year in Scotland. But when I did it, it was standard grades, and it was over 2 years. The problem with standard grade modern languages was that half the grade was based on speaking and writing, and the other half was based on reading and listening. So you had all 4 skills, which sounds good. However, the issue is that with the speaking and the writing, you did them in class before you sat the exam. So the reading and the listening was done in an exam hall, and the speaking and the writing were done in class. If you're thinking, oh, well, it must have been a case of you had a conversation with the teacher, or you given a question and you had to write a response. Unfortunately not. It was a case of you got to prepare your answer ahead of time. You prepared a written essay, or you prepared an essay, you prepared a dialogue or something like that. You memorized the essay, you memorized the dialogue, and then when it came time to do the exams, the written exam and the speaking exam, you reproduced the essay from memory. You just memorized the essay that you had written, you rewrote it, that was your writing exam. The speaking, similar idea. You memorized the dialogue, you went into the exam, you gave the teacher your piece of paper with the dialogue on it, and she basically read the dialogue and you responded with the answers that you had written. So it's not a test of your knowledge of a language, it's a test of memory. In my case, I was very fortunate because I generally had a very good memory. And so for me, it was super easy. It was I walked out with a top grade in both of them because I was able to memorize them. Nothing to do with my level of German. It was all to do with just the sort of, being able to memorize them. It's quite funny as well. I often joke with my mum and my dad about this, because when I was practicing the dialogue, I used to get my mum to read it out. My mum, who cannot speak a foreign language, she tries, but she would agree with me. She's not a fluent speaker in a foreign language, and we always have this joke because she would read out the dialogue, and it actually did help me because I had to try and decipher what she was saying, correct her, and then say sort of my own bit. So I guess that helped with the memorization. When you have a sort of funny memory like that, that's the kind of thing it helps you to memorize, because you can remember kind of what she was saying, kind of sticks in the memory. But that's a sort of a joke we always have. But the point is, with these two elements, the speaking and the writing, that was 50% of your grade. So the way it was structured was, if you got the equivalent of an A, for some reason standard grades, they were done on numbers where 1 was the best. 1 and 2 were credit grades, 3 and 4 were general grades, 5 and 6 were foundation grades, and then a 7 was a fail. They changed it, the nationals, it's A, B, C, D. I'm not sure why they went with numbers originally, but that was just how it was. The point is that if you were like me and you got a 1 in the writing and the speaking, simply by memorizing the scripts, when you went into the exam, before you even sat the reading and the listening exam, even if you got a fail, if you got a 7, if you failed those exams, basically if you turned up and wrote your name on the paper and then left, your overall grade would be a 3. So there's the equivalent of like a C. So basically you were already passing the exam with a quite a good grade without even sitting the paper, because of the way it was structured. When we talk about the reading and the listening exams, and this is something that is still, in the case of the National 5s, is still the case with the National 5 reading and the National 5 listening today. And indeed the hires, which is like the qualification you need to get into university. In Scotland we call them hires and advanced hires. In England they do A levels, and sort of an A level is somewhere in between a hire and an advanced hire. If you're listening, if you're maybe a bit more familiar with the English system, because I know that for like international schools, for example, they tend to teach, well, they can teach A levels abroad if it's sort of like an international school, an English speaking international school in another country. They tend to do A levels. A higher is sort of somewhere in between, but basically you need a higher to get into university in Scotland. You need several hires to get into university in Scotland, and this is something that happens with both of them nowadays, or sorry, with all of these levels nowadays still, and it was the case when I was at school, is that for the reading and the listening, you write the questions are all in English, and you write your answers in English. And in the reading exam, you can use a dictionary. I mean, it's like they're trying to make it as easy as possible. It's when you look at it now, especially when you compare the exams to like official exams for levels of a modern language, you know, these exams like Cambridge English, or the DELI, which is the Spanish one, or the DAL for the DELF for French, the Goethe exams for German, they're completely different. They're completely different. In the our exams, you know, you can use a dictionary, you write your answers in English. It's not really testing anything, really. It's not a typical test of a language. It doesn't test your understanding. It doesn't test your ability to speak the language. It's really sort of poorly done. It's something I would like to change. It's something I've been sort of speaking to local politicians about. You know, as a someone who's a teacher of English and has also learned other languages, I've been sort of contacting sort of politicians, local representatives in Parliament, the Scottish Parliament, to say, look, this isn't really acceptable, and here's how we could change it. Because, you know, that's the thing, is it's just one thing to say, well, this sucks, but, you know, you gotta be the change you want to see as well. So I think it's important that hopefully we can try and change it. But that's certainly something that I would be looking to change in the first place. But I mean, just to give you guys kind of an idea of what the level is like, is that's how the exams are done. You know, they're done poorly. They're done in a way that doesn't really test your understanding of the language. And, you know, it's not a surprise that the level of foreign languages is so low in the UK, in Scotland, in the UK in general, because, you know, people go to school, they don't really learn much. They have these memories of classes of, you know, grammar and lists of vocabulary, and it puts a bad taste in their mouth, and then they don't want to continue, and all that kind of stuff. It makes everybody's job a lot harder, and I think it needs to change. And that's kind of my story of how I'd learned German, and how after sort of 6 years I couldn't speak it, and now it just, like, you know, the touristy basics. Compare it to my French, and, you know, I've been studying French for a little over a year, and I've got a level of sort of like B2, C1, you know, can conversationally fluent in French, and that's after a year and a bit. I mean, it's completely different. To have 6 years of German and nothing to show for it, it's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate. And I think as well, you know, sort of talking about that kind of the teacher in primary school who had the 3-month course and then went on to teach you know, a class of primary school students German is pretty shocking. But if you want to meet a teacher who can help you with your own language studies, you can do that with iTalki. And I spoke about this in the last episode, but I got in contact with iTalki, who have provided me with an affiliate link. If you don't know what iTalki is a language learning platform that can put you in contact with teachers from all over the world. They're available anytime, really. It's the kind of thing where you have this access to all these teachers for whatever language you can think of, whenever you want. You can take them to suit your needs. They have one-to-one classes. They've got classes in groups as well, if that's what you're interested in. But the great thing is you can simply get in contact with the teacher, tell them what you want for the language, what you'd like to learn, how you'd like to do it, and they will tailor the class to your needs. I've been using iTalki myself for a little over a year now with French and Spanish. I've met some wonderful people, and that's the reason why I reached out to iTalki to get this affiliate link, because I think iTalki are fantastic. I think it's a great service to use, and I would 100% recommend it if you want to take your language learning to the next level. So if you click on the link in the description, you sign up with the link, you will receive a bonus $10 worth of credits after your first class. And I get a little bit of money as well, so it helps me out. But if you're thinking about it, if you haven't tried out iTalki before, 100% give it a look. The link is in the description below. So back to the episode. So I suppose with having spent 6 years learning German, the question for me is, am I interested in taking it up again? And the answer is, well, yes and no. Yes, because I do kind of have this feeling of, well, I spent 6 years learning German. Surely there is some kind of base knowledge, If I could go back to learning it, I imagine with the techniques and the methods and the things that I know now, I would pick it up fairly quickly. It would give me a chance to kind of discover the language properly, discover the country properly. Well, not just the country, because, you've got Switzerland, Austria, all these other countries that speak German as well. And it's kind of these sorts of opportunities. It is something I would like to do, but the issue is just unfortunately time. That is unfortunately the main thing, the bottleneck, the problem causer, we would say, is just the lack of time. It's simply it, basically. I just don't have enough time between working and all that kind of thing. I mean, if I won the lottery, sure, but it's finding the time to do it in between the Spanish and the French, and I want to do Catalan next year. It's hard to kind of find the time for it. It is something I would like to do in the future, but it's just a case of if and when I had the time. I think it would be good though, because I think it would sort of give that opportunity to really go and explore Germany properly and really, and again, like these other countries. I'd love to go to Vienna. I think Vienna in Austria, I quite like the cafe culture, the sort of coffee houses. I'd love to be able to go there and really get immersed in the culture. Of course, you can go to these places without knowing the language. You can, of course, travel without knowing the language. And again, it's really important. I think travel is probably the greatest thing that anyone could ever do in their life is travel to another country and enjoy another culture, discover another culture. The thing with knowing the language, and talking from my own experiences with Spanish and French, is that if you know the language, then the experience, it's like more authentic, I guess you could say. It's more authentic, it's richer, it's deeper. It gives you a better understanding of the culture. And I think, knowing that with German would be interesting. I have been to Germany once before. I went to Germany, I think it was 2 years ago. To tell you the truth, I didn't have the best experience. I went to Dusseldorf, and it was at the end of a sort of a week's worth of travel around. I've been to Belgium and Luxembourg as well, and I know that there are some Germans that listen to the podcast. I can see from the sort of statistics and things like that, and maybe you guys are listening and going, "Oh my god, you idiot! You went to Dusseldorf. Of course you had a bad time." Or maybe you're listening and thinking, "Oh, I'm from Dusseldorf, and I hate it sucks that you didn't have a good time." But I think it was just one of those holidays where I think it doesn't matter the country or the place that I went to. It was just kind of a couple of days where it was like everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Got to the airport and got stuck in a massive queue at immigration, and then afterwards on the train from the airport it was boiling hot, and then I got to the train station and the train was delayed, and then I got to my hotel and the room wasn't ready, and then I went out for dinner and my card didn't work, and then I had to go and get money out, and the ATM charged me an extra €5 to take money out, and then it was this thing and it was the next thing, and I think it was at the end of a long holiday, and I just wanted to come home. Basically, I think I'd had enough at that point. So I didn't really get a fair opportunity to properly explore Germany, to properly get a feel for the culture. And I would totally, go back. I would 100% go back, try a different region. Like I said, I'd love to go to Bavaria. I'd love to go to the south of Germany as well. I mentioned Austria and Vienna. I'd love to go to the German parts of Switzerland as well. I think it's super important as well, talking about that and talking about travel and how important travel is. If you have those negative experiences, then don't let that define a country for you. Don't say, well, I had one negative experience in this country and now I'm never going back. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Say, well, I had one negative experience, but it's always worth giving it another go. It's always worth having another look. It's always worth trying again, because you never know. You will, you could have a fantastic experience the next time. So don't let one negative experience, it's the same in anything really. Don't let one negative experience sort of define a culture or define something for you. Don't let one negative experience stop you from exploring more and discovering more. And so I would definitely like to give Germany another go at some point in the future. Maybe with knowing German, maybe not. Maybe it might just be a case of trying it for a few months and sort of getting a sort of basic conversational level. That could be fun as well. But I think time will be the biggest decider there. If I win the lottery, who knows? It could be, but until then, maybe it'll just need to be a case of wait and see. So I think that about wraps it up for today. Another sort of rambling look at learning languages. I hope you enjoyed that. Hope you enjoyed this sort of exploration. Remember, the link to the transcript is in the description below. The link to the iTalki affiliate link is there if you want to check out iTalki. There's also the link to the Ko-Fi if you want to toss some spare change my way. We also have an Instagram, even though I'm absolutely horrendous at posting on it. So, follow if you wish. But again, it would just be a case of announcing when new episodes are published. So thank you very much for listening to the podcast. I hope you all have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.